Hello, welcome to the Women's Eye podcast. Thanks for joining me. I'm your host, Stacey Gualandi, a little nasally, but here at the Women's Eye, I like to brag about intriguing women who are taking charge, breaking the rules, and being brave. Like my guest today, Lisa Guerrero. Now, I know you recognize Lisa, but let's recap. Former NFL cheerleader, sportscaster, actress, sports cactress, Monday Night Football sideline reporter, multi-award-winning chief investigative correspondent for Inside Edition, and now she's added best-selling author. This is her new book, Warrior, My Path to Being Brave. Now, as an alum of the Inside Edition sisterhood and a friend, I am so happy to have Lisa on the Women's Eye to help us all learn how to be brave. Well, hello there, warrior goddess. How are you?
Hello, Stacey. So good to see you. Thank you for having me on.
No, this is fantastic. I mean, I think you could teach a master class on being brave after the career that you've had. And I think I only knew about a half of it, but wow. I mean, you definitely had a book in you. That is for sure. Everything that you laid out. I mean, now there's just going to be a movie about you, I think, right? So.
Well, there's some talk in the works about possibly a scripted series. So based on the book, because I think just like you, Stacey, I mean, we've known each other for a long time, but even some of my closest friends don't know about some of the challenges I faced, especially earlier in my career when I was an actor, when I was in NFL entertainment, when I was a sportscaster locally, then regionally, then nationally. I knew, and as you said, I had a book in me, but for many years, I didn't know what the story arc was. What's the last chapter? What's the point? What's the message? And like most people, we have stories to tell, but I didn't want to just write about me and write about my stories without there being a real purpose. And the purpose-driven project became, how can we determine what bravery is? And can we become more brave over time through facing our individual challenges? And as soon as that concept snapped into place, everything else made sense with the book. Then I was able to tell the story through the lens of what bravery is.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about an arc, I mean, there was the rise, and then there's that, that third act where it's the challenge, and then it's boom, the resurrection, and look at where you're now. Because I don't know, like 20 years ago, would you have thought this is where you'd be right now? Chief investigative correspondent for Inside Edition, but also have this amazing book. I mean, you had to live this in order to put this book out. Would you have thought that's where you would be now?
No, because early in my career, as everybody is early in their careers, you're struggling. You're just trying to get through the day. You're learning your craft. You're, learning about your organization, who your audience is, what your skill sets are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. Let's, pump up those weaknesses so we get stronger at those. And like everybody else, early, in my 20s and 30s, I was just trying to tread water, just trying to keep my head above water. And then as I started to really realize what my strengths were, storytelling, connecting with viewers, I have a natural curiosity about what makes people tick, which lends itself to journalism. I started to realize this is where I belong. I'm a storyteller. But as I started to realize that there were unique obstacles as a woman in sports that I was enduring that my male colleagues were not, I started to write even more detailed journal entries. I'd always kept a diary or journal notes, as most journalists do. We keep notes about things.
That's my biggest regret, is that I didn't. I say this all the time. Like if I kept stupid calendars and I wrote on a calendar, this is what I did today. But yeah, this is the one thing I tell people all the time. Don't do what I did, write journals, or keep a diary of everything.
Absolutely. And because I did that for so many years, I was able then to go back once I decided to write a book. The book I originally intended to write was not the book that ended up being written. That's because I had these guideposts through, the work that I had on camera, that I could look at old VHS and beta tapes, and also these old journals that told me what I had gone through was traumatic and serious. And I don't want any other women to ever go through what I experienced back then, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even a few years ago. So that was the impetus, to get it on paper and to write it the way that it's written now. And so what you see is very different than what I began to write, but this is absolutely the book I was meant to write in this moment.
Well, and you come by it naturally too, because warrior, you've probably told this a million times, but warrior, that's what Guerrero means. And it's a bummer for me because Gualandi, I think, means wimp or something. No, just kidding.
No, it doesn't.
Or wannabe warrior. But this is your last name. I mean, that's what warrior is all about. So I would say you pretty much have lived up to your name, don't you think?
Well, I feel like I have now. But again, going back to why I wrote the book, when I was 8 years old, my mother, who was a Chilean immigrant, was diagnosed with lymphoma, and she knew she didn't have very much more time. She knew she was going to die soon. And she pulled me aside and she said, Lisita, never forget that your last name, Guerrero, means warrior, and you were born to fight. And she passed away within a month of that conversation. So at 8 years old, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what my last name meant. I didn't know what warrior was. I didn't know what being brave was. And so it took me decades to unpack that brief conversation, that message that my mother gave me. Now I believe that I live up to my name. But as you will read in Warrior, there were many times that I believed I wasn't living up to that name, that I had made mistakes, that I had compromised, that I had brought shame to my heritage, to my mother's name. And so it took me years to really refocus my life and my purpose to say, this is what I was meant to do. This is what I'm going to work towards. These are the things that are important to me. Now I wake up every day and I feel like a warrior. But I also believe you, Stacey, and anybody watching this right now, we all have an inner warrior, and we all have bravery. We just need to be able to unleash it and exercise. I believe bravery is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger you become. So my book talks about that as well, ways that you can become more brave.
I definitely want to touch on that too, because those are really tremendous points that you have to help remind it. Because even since reading the book, I feel that, there's things about being brave. It doesn't mean like jumping out of a plane necessarily, but it's just about trusting your instincts, which I think I've been like this over my career, over my life. But how much is that a part of it? Because I think you did trust your instincts for so long, as a cheerleader. And I think you said it sort of shook the shyness out of you, but I think you kept building. And then there was a time when outside sources, I think, tend to have us sort of doubt that inner voice that we have. So I'm just wondering,
Yes. Yeah. And I think women especially, we are taught to smile more, argue less, get along, don't burn bridges, be nice. And so we start to feel like that inner voice is not as important as our boss or a colleague or somebody else we see on social media. We start to doubt ourselves. And then we lose that sparkle and that bravery, the gumption we have as kids to go out and conquer the world or dig a hole to China or do the things that we want to do when we're little because nobody says we can't do it. We lose that edge the older we get. And so it's a big deal to be able to trust your instincts. And it does take guts and bravery to do that. The bravery that I'm talking about in my book is a different type of bravery than I think the traditional model of bravery is. My kind of bravery is not about audacity, going out there and having a gun on your hip and swagger. My bravery comes from empathy. I have gone through trauma. Other people that I interview in my stories have gone through trauma. That's how I connect with them. And because they trust me to tell me their stories, I then go forward and chase the bad guy or hold somebody accountable on behalf of the story or on behalf of the survivor that tells me the story. Not because I want to go chase bad guys, although it is fun. I'm doing it in service to the story. So again, I think women have bravery already. We are already brave. We're courageous people. Unfortunately, society tells us that bravery is something different than what we know it is. It takes a lot of courage to be able to leave a bad relationship, to be a single mother, to juggle 2 or 3 jobs while you're trying to go to college and earn a degree. All of these things take courage. That is a deeper, more profound courage than swagger or audacity that we see in the movies or in action films. Women are the real badasses, in my opinion. And I think we have to have a different conversation about what is a warrior, what is bravery, you know?
Exactly. Now, for you though, you were on this trajectory. What do you think it was? What was the turning point for you where you really felt that you were coming into your own as this brave woman, where you said, I'm not going to have my life be dictated by other people?
It was hard because throughout the 10-year span of my sports career, I was pretty much the only woman in the locker rooms that I covered. On the shows that I was hosting or co-hosting, it was all men, and I was the token woman on a lot of those programs. So it was tough to be able to find my voice and be brave enough to share my strong opinions about things on camera or in front of a live audience. That took time. So the first lesson is nothing happens overnight. None of these things are easy, and there's not a pill you can take that will make you brave or will make you successful. It takes time, and it takes hard work and courage and a stick-to-itiveness that you need to have over a long career. But through that sports experience, the one thing that I learned is that I was very good at connecting with people doing sit-down interviews, that these big superstar athletes like Shaquille O'Neal, Alex Rodriguez, Barry Bonds, Mia Hamm, Nomar Garcia-Parra, all of these superstars, I could sit down with them and they would open up to me and cry and tell me their like deepest, darkest secrets. And I figured that I had this thing, which I now identify as empathy, that got them to open up. So that's when I started to figure out, Stacey, okay, this is where I should be focusing my energy. I think I'm good at this specific thing. And then everything else can grow from there. Once I identified that, as we all should be doing, identify what your strengths are right now and work on growing that. And everything will come to fruition around the one super strength that you have.
Yep.
So that is my thing. And the reason that I have the empathy is because I have gone through trauma and challenges, sexual harassment, verbal abuse, misogyny, all these things I recount in my book, Warrior, to great detail, painful detail. Those are the things that have made me stronger. Those are gifts. Those things that happened to me are an important part of my story because I was able to turn pain into power. And that is something you must do in order to get through the obstacles.
Yeah, because you know what, no one gets through this life kind of unscathed. We don't want to have to deal with these things, but it's interesting something you said too. It's like knowing what your strengths are, because I've chosen to leave some jobs, and then other jobs I didn't have quite the choice. But it's like you have, it's your identity sometimes is wrapped up in a lot of these things too. So was that a tough thing for you as well? When you feel like your identity has sort of been sacrificed?
Yeah. And I think, we are the ones that determine what we choose to lead with, what we choose to believe ourselves to be, who we are.
Yeah.
Our identity is something that we should determine, not outside sources. So, and that's another really hard lesson to learn, is that we are the narrator of our own story. We are the author of our own book. You and I decide what our legacy is, right? We decide for ourselves, not our bosses, not outside entities, not our colleagues or other people that want to take us down or bring us up, or even our family members. We decide what our legacy is going to be, and then we move forward to try to hopefully live up to what we want our legacy to be. Now, I think you find surprises along the way. There are going to be things that you didn't realize. Oh, I had an impact on this person, or I did this one thing that I'm really surprised I was able to do. So as we get these surprise bombs in our lives, we also have to leave our heart open to that and know that, just because I want this to be my trajectory, something else is going to come out of left field, and all of a sudden my career is going to go like this, or my life path like this. And if those are good, positive things, you got to kind of follow those,
Yeah.
those instincts. And again, going back to trusting your gut. Can I tell you one thing? By the way,
Yeah.
we're kind of on this subject, but I definitely want to get to this while I'm having this conversation with you, Stacey. I want to thank you. You are the reason I'm on Inside Edition. And
Me?
it is you had an enormous amount to do with the trajectory of my life and career in such a positive way. And this is what I'm saying. Like, you never know what you do in your life that's going to affect somebody in a positive or negative way. Stacey, you did an interview about me before I was on Inside Edition. When I had done the cover of Playboy, you and our fantastic photojournalist, Eric Chin, came to my house. You did a story about me, and that led to me getting a deal with Inside Edition. But had it not been for you, Stacey, and your amazing ability as a journalist, your incredible questions, the way you structured the story, had that not happened in that way, where those viewers saw me in a positive light, I probably wouldn't have gotten that contract. So you are responsible for me having the job on Inside Edition in a very big way. So you need to
Wow.
know that.
Well,
Thank you.
and I love that you name checked Eric Chin, because I told him, I said, I talked to him not too long, and I said, we're going to slip your name in there somewhere, Eric. But it's great though, because, and it gave you an opportunity to realize that, okay, my life doesn't have to be sports. Maybe at that moment, yes, that's who you identified as for so many years was, and you might not even, and even when you got on Inside Edition, you didn't necessarily know that you were going to go into this whole investigative route. Did you know that you had that in you to be able to, confront someone like Kenneth Copeland or help solve a murder? I never even knew that story that you helped find out who murdered this young girl. I was like, wow. I'm just completely amazed at what you've achieved there,
Thank you.
And you might not have even have known that that's where you were headed,
That's why I say we need to leave our heart open to potential changes of direction in our career and in our personal life.
Yeah.
So, I was covering sports and having sit down interviews and asking really tough. I asked Barry Bonds if he had done steroids. I was the first person, male or female, on camera to pointedly ask him that question. I became known towards the end of my sports career at Fox for asking really tough questions of superstar athletes and getting them to answer me, demanding accountability. And that was something a lot of women in sports weren't doing and still don't do a lot of or enough of.
You're great.
Journalists in general don't do that.
You get right in there, because I think people probably look at you, think, oh, she's going to be really nice or whatever, or she's not. And the other story I never knew was the press conference with, this is a great story in the book. I don't want to spoil it, but that press conference with Dennis the worm. Rodman. Yeah. Dennis Rodman. Yeah. I was like, oh my God, that was Lisa, so, those are amazing moments. And that's why I hated that there was so much. I've dealt with like criticism or some sort of an embarrassment or whatever, but it was not on this level that you had to deal with it. Millions and millions, and mine was a faux pas in a game show. So, but very small, but, so I can only imagine what you must have gone through dealing with so much, and that was pre-social media for the most part, or not as intense, I guess, as it is now. So this should also be warrior and then small, like survivor, so.
Well, that one of the reasons I wanted to write really honestly about being humiliated or making a mistake or compromising or, doing the wrong thing sometimes, or even, an accident blowing up into a very big, catastrophe. These things happen in life. We make mistakes, small mistakes, large mistakes. And, when I was on Monday Night Football, I misspoke. I made a small mistake, which I corrected on the air, but it gave my critics an opportunity to say, see, she doesn't know sports. She's just a model. She's just a pretty face. She doesn't know who she's talking to. So that blew up into a huge catastrophe for me in front of 40 million viewers. And it led to me being fired from Monday Night Football, the biggest job in sports that a woman could get at the time. And it was devastating to me. And I thought when I first started writing the book years ago, I was like, do I want to talk about all these ugly, uncomfortable things that make me feel shame, and do I want to dredge up all of this stuff? And at the end of the day, I said yes, because that's honest. That's the book, and that's life. Life is messy. And sometimes we learn from these painful experiences, as I certainly did. But now, 20 years later, I look back on my younger self, and I feel so much pain for her, and I suffer for her, because the me of 20 years ago absorbed all of that criticism like a sponge. And it really led to a lot of trauma and anxiety and depression for me. Now, even with social media, I let that stuff roll right off my back. I mean, nobody hurts me. I'm not afraid of anything. I am brave. I am a warrior 100% through and through. But the 20-year ago me, right? I'm 58 now. At 38, I was
yay to 58.
Yay to 58, yay to 50s and on. But yeah, the younger me was not able to deal with that very well. And I almost killed myself, when I talk about that in the book, suicidal ideations, depression. And it took me a couple years to dig myself out of that trench of depression. So no, it wasn't an easy thing to write about. We don't like to talk about mistakes and all of these ugly things, but how do we fix it if we don't face it? How do we keep somebody else from going through what we went through if we're not willing to talk about what we went through?
Yeah. And I think that's why don't you find now feedback from your book is that people are really relating to your story? And I think you said somewhere that this is really a love letter to not only to your younger self, but to others, that it's really speaking to people. It spoke to me because I've gone through that situational depression, and it's not fun. And so I feel like that you've really, again, you've had to be very vulnerable in order to help other people.
And that's the point, really, that's the point of writing the book is, sharing my story so that other people don't have to go through the same things I went through, but also to give, some really real suggestions about how we can strengthen our courage muscle. And that I get into that towards the end of the book. The reason why I do that, because I thought, well, maybe I'll sprinkle these little lessons along in the book, but I waited till the end of the book to write those so that you could see what my journey was first. And then when you read at the end, you go, oh, that's why she went through this, and this is what she got out of it. So it kind of makes more sense to get to the end and to read these exercises and lessons. But, at the end of the day, first of all, I'm so sorry that you went through some of what I went through, because there is nothing that is as painful and isolating as depression.
Yeah, because then, you think like decisions that you make, or like, why am I doing this? That kind of thing. It's again,
so
on a grand scale for yourself, mine, but I guess it's all relative, what we're able to handle, but yeah, it gets tough, but you mentioned that about saving to the end of the book, and maybe what we'll do, unfortunately, I could feel like I could talk to you for a million hours, but in talking about, what are the steps, really, as people listen to you now, what are those main top tips that you give to people for really, trying to start being brave or continue to be brave?
So definitely read the book, you guys, because it will give you very specific steps that have helped me through journalism figure out this empathy and how empathy leads to bravery. So there is like a whole chapter on that. But I want to leave you with one really important exercise. This is the biggest tip I can give anybody. And I talk about this all the time. It's crucial. I want you to commit a random act of bravery every day. What does that mean, Lisa? What does this mean? This means that tomorrow morning, you're going to wake up and you're not going to know what the day has planned for you. But at some point during the day, there will be one moment where you will be called to be courageous in a small way or a big way. But there will be something that happens in your life where typically you would say, oh, I don't want to have that confrontation. I don't want to be the first person to pitch that idea in the meeting. I don't want to be that kid that sits next to the awkward kid at lunch. But I'm telling you, there's going to be one moment every day that I want you to lean into courage instead of backing away. And again, especially as women, we're told to not be confrontational. I'm not asking you to start fights or to get out there and stop a bullet with your bare chest. I am saying that if somebody needs you to stand up for them, for example, that you stand up for them. Or it could be as simple as, I typically, let's say you travel for work and you never want to sit by yourself in a restaurant. Women, especially, notorious about not wanting to do this for some reason.
I do that all the time.
But it's amazing that some people can't do that.
Do it. Yeah.
Go and say table for one. And it's like, for some people, it's very awkward. Do one small thing every single day that takes you out of the comfort zone that you have in your life. And then over time, when life calls for it, and it will, there will be a big moment where you are going to be called to be a superhero. And unless you practice being brave, you won't do it. But if you practice being brave every day, you will step into that place and you will tap into the inner badass that you have inside you. And you are going to conquer that dragon. You are going to be that superhero because you've practiced it in small ways. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
I think that's the one thing we have to, that's the one thing if you get one thing out of my book or this conversation or meeting me, it would be, please practice courage every day.
Yeah. I mean, because you're completely led by example. And, you know, your name, it all started with your mommy, with Lucy. And I know this past Valentine's Day must have been a very difficult one because, you know, I believe it's been 50 years since you lost your mom. And do you think, I mean, I could probably answer this question myself, but do you think that your mom would be absolutely so proud of you and said, you know, you took my advice, Lisa, you listened to your mom, you know?
Absolutely. And I think she is, you know, I think she's still here in spirit. You know, she's obviously, when we lose somebody that we love and they're physically gone, we feel the loss of their physical presence. But through time and through an understanding of what her legacy was to me, I definitely know that she lives in me, around me. She's with me. She knows what I'm doing. She helps guide my life. I'm a very spiritual person, and I believe that part of the reason I wrote the book was because she wanted me to write the book.
Aww.
And so I do believe that she's very proud of the book and the message of the book and the fact that it's her name, our name.
You know, do you think your mom gets a little worried about you with all these Inside Edition investigations? They get a little dangerous, young lady.
She does. And I know my dad does.
Yes.
My dad, who just went through quadruple bypass surgery in November.
How's he doing? He's doing good, right?
He's amazing. He's doing so well. Yes, he's doing great. But yeah, sometimes I don't tell him about the investigations until after we've already shot them and before they air, so he doesn't get too worried. But they can get pretty dicey. And if you've seen Inside Edition, you'll know what I mean. I'm literally chasing people down. But that's, to me, it's a joy and it's an honor to be able to, you know, to force bad guys to be accountable for their actions on behalf of victims. Like, what a great job. I'm very blessed to have this job.
I would say so. And if they see you coming, they're like, oh, no, we're not. You know what I mean? It's like, it's Lisa Guerrero. No, that's not good. So, but no, well, it's fantastic. And then I kind of said earlier, but I mean, I see you having a show, like your own investigative show, like Being Brave with Lisa Guerrero. I don't know. Could be a
You can
possibility.
produce it. Let's work together. Here we go.
That would be
Next
fantastic. But oh, Lisa, thank you so much. Again, well, the book Warrior, My Path to Being Brave. It's fantastic. I loved it. And I learned so much. We both learned or had to step in horse poop early in our career. I didn't realize that. So.
Oh, you did too? Oh my gosh.
On the set of a
People are
movie.
wondering.
I know.
Oh, no.
So we'll have to compare notes, but I just thank you so much. Now, if you want to learn more about Lisa Guerrero and her new bestseller Warrior, just go to our website, thewomenseye.com. And there you'll also find our other two books. We've got 20 Women Change Makers. Just shop wherever you buy books and at changemakersbook.com, and 20 Women Storytellers at womenstorytellers.com. You know, when we do the sequel, Lisa, you'll have to be in the sequels to Storytellers. You'll be our prime subject. So, but thanks again to you, Lisa Guerrero, and to all of you for tuning in to the Women's Eye podcast. Be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and be brave. I'm Stacey Gualandi. Remember, it's the world as we see it.